just so that you know that. Welcome to our spotlight on YWAM Alternatives. And I try to do a spotlight every 45, 60 days, depending on my travels and other speaking engagements and work. Sometimes I do it within 45 days, sometimes I do it within 90 days. But I try to keep somewhat of a rhythm. And I think this is our sixth one that we're doing. We've done Prince George, we've done Modesto, we've done St. John in different places that we've gone to and listened to people. And the purpose for this is just to get us outside of our own four walls as YWAM and see some of the innovative things that are going on. We had a wonderful call last time with Marlene and Arts with the Mission. And then I was just recently down in Texas and visited her studio where she's engaging about 300 people a week down there in her studio through lessons and training, and all of them coming from outside the YWAM world. Really an amazing business as mission art studio, dance studio that's going on down in Texas. We just try to gather every 45 days and hear from somebody in the YWAM world, whether it's YWAM North America or Europe or different places around the globe. And because when we talk about city ministry is oftentimes thought of as just ministry to the poor. But city ministry goes much beyond that. It goes into the university, it goes into the arts, it goes into music, it goes into sports, it goes into business, it goes to the upper class, it goes to the lower class. The gospel in the city ranges from the poor to the powerful and everything in between. And so, what is city ministry? It's mercy ministry, it's frontier missions, it's ministry to the unhoused, it's university ministry, it's everything because the city is complex. And so, my goal is to try to just continue to bring into our attention the different facets of ministry in the city. So, the format here is I want to keep it to 45-minute calls. And we're going to take about 30 minutes here to interview Jari. If you have questions, put them in the chat, and we will get to those questions either in the interview itself, but we will take 10 minutes at the end to answer those questions before we sign off. If you want to stay on after the call, that's cool. I'm not sure if Jari has time to stay on, but I'll stay on and talk to you for a little bit. But 45 minutes is what we set to accomplish these calls. So here we go. I hope you're ready. Jari, why don't you just kind of introduce us to yourself and tell us a bit about your journey in YWAM and in a nutshell, explain to us what is YWAM Alternatives.
Thank you. Well, I've been in YWAM since 87. Started in Finland first. I'm from Finland. My wife, Tanya, is from Ukraine. And we've lived in different countries. Started on a YWAM base in Finland. We did a lot of Slavic ministries. I was with Slavic ministries, if you know Al Akimov and that group. Then later in Austria, also was with Slavic ministries in Austria. But really, with alternatives, I mean, I've been doing all kinds of ministries, street evangelism, base leadership, counseling, teaching. But gradually, I realized that people are really interested in spirituality, but not so much religion. And I know I'm just a couple of years too young to have been part of the hippie movement, Jesus freaks and all that. I was born 1962, so I was just like 10 years old or something. So I know that now that from those days, this whole slogan began to spread, spiritual, not religious. So gradually I began to realize that this is something we need to pay attention to and eventually really focus on. And YWAM Alternatives Network came out of that. And we've been doing now this kind of ministry alternatives for 16 years.
Mm.
And it's been a lot of fun. We reach out to seekers who are seeking spiritual truth and experiences. And we have in the New Testament, we have different, maybe in quotation marks, goodies from the Holy Spirit that people are sometimes really open to and interested.
Mm.
Yeah, so that's kind of
Great,
the
great.
background. I began in Toronto doing Jewish ministry in the early 90s, putting up little posters in the Jewish neighborhood on the streets. Are you interested in spiritual things? With our phone number that people could take with them. And we had all kinds of calls. We met with all kinds of Jewish people that were interested in spirituality. Some were talking about UFOs, others about Kabbalah, others about just whatever healing, supernatural stuff. But that was one of the first steps. I realized that, hey, people are really interested. You know, we don't need to twist their arm. Like in Slavic ministries in the 80s, especially, we had to kind of argue with
Oh, yeah,
atheists.
yeah,
And that's kind of boring, you know, but now we get to our topics real fast with these
yeah,
seekers.
yeah. Yeah, I'm in San Francisco. It's not the most church city in the United States, but it's a very spiritual city. And it may not be a very Christian or church-going city, but it's a very spiritual city with a lot of spiritual seekers that are here in San
Yeah.
Francisco. So, Jari, as we continue on this thread, tell us, how has the ministry um, evolved over time, and how did you get involved in really making this a focus of what you do?
Well, like I said, it's been a process. So like in the Jewish ministry, I began to talk to people more about supernatural experiences. Are they interested in spiritual stuff? Then in St. Petersburg, we started YWAM in Russia, in St. Petersburg in the 90s. And I realized that, you know, in the 90s, a lot of Western evangelists and preachers were coming to Russia and holding evangelistic meetings in movie theaters and places like that. But then in between the Christian preachers, I began to notice that there are healers and psychics, kind of like New Age people. They're holding their events and meetings in those same places. And so we began to talk in our staff meeting in the 90s in St. Petersburg about what could we offer. Like we were busy with doing all kinds of other ministries in the city, kind of, you know, traditional city ministries, street kids ministries and so forth. But we were playing with this idea, kind of maybe joking and laughing about it, how shouldn't we also have some kind of a cosmic connection, you know, to offer
Mhm.
to people, to those that are interested in that kind of stuff. But we were busy. Like I know many YWAM bases and churches are already busy. So now we're facing this challenge actually as a ministry specializing in this kind of target group. People in churches and YWAM bases might be open and kind of interested, but then there is no time to commit people to this kind of new outreach, or so that's our prayer request and challenge. So the same thing for us, you know, we were thinking we should do something. Then we moved to Cyprus as a family from Russia, and there I saw this big ad in a local newspaper about a mind, body, spirit expo coming up.
Mm. Mm.
And I think I was complaining to my wife Tanya, when are Christians going to be doing something about this? So that's a dangerous thought. Several times in my life, I've been complaining about something, and then God says, how about you do something?
Mm.
So I took some people from our team to pray at the Mind, Body, Spirit Expo, kind of in a traditional way. Now I kind of laugh and joke about that kind of approach. We went there almost doing a Jericho march around the place, and we bought a ticket. We went into the venue and were praying and walking around. And one of our team members was a former New Ager who used to have a table or booth there. And then a couple of New Age ladies came up to her and said that, hey, Winnie, we haven't seen you for years. She said, yeah, I found Jesus. And
Mm.
they were like, oh, okay, not interested. And I thought, wow, this is really hard ground. This
Mm.
is tough and dark. I kind of laugh about that now because that's what many people think Christians in churches. Always when we do trainings, we do this carry the light training workshop. Christians in churches, they ask, I know usually what the first question will be. They're like, Jari, are you getting like attacked by the devil a lot? Is your life really difficult and dark because of this? I'm like, well, we're missionaries. Would you ask somebody who goes to India or Pakistan or Taiwan or Japan the same question? Is life really dark and dangerous there? So I don't know. In the Western world, we have this funny idea that this kind of work is somehow cutting edge and dark and dangerous. Anyway, we're trying to dial down all this, this fear
Okay.
language and these attitudes. We're trying to help people when we do trainings, and hopefully I'm able to help you now today here.
So, Yari, when we talk about this, yeah, I think most of us think about witchcraft and curses and the occult and darkness and spells and everything comes to our mind about this stuff. And how do you contextualize the gospel in the midst of all this? And you go to expos, you go to fairs. Are you a speaker at some of those places? I know that Nathan Wagner up in Mendocino, I think he is oftentimes does workshops inside of those
Yeah.
expos. How how do you what kind of language do you use, and how do you blend the gospel in, and how do you the gospel is always the same, but how we preach it keeps on changing. So, what is it that you do that you to contextualize while ensuring the integrity of the message going forward?
Yeah, well, you should have come to the training week I did at Mendocino YWAM before they
Mm-hmm.
started that ministry. Anyway, yeah, it's concerning warfare and curses and all that. I think you get what you believe for. If you as a Christian you're afraid and you believe that that kind of stuff will happen.
Mm.
So it will maybe it will happen according to your faith. So I think we need to focus on Jesus and all the kingdom stuff, all the good stuff, instead of being fearful. People can actually sense what we are afraid of, or if we're really nervous, or if we want to just preach at people. Many of these spiritual seekers are actually quite sensitive.
Mm.
So that's why we need to really consider contextualization. Like if we go there, kind of like some of the first street preachers in Moscow after the Soviet Union collapsed, they went out to the main street and were preaching, starting brothers and sisters, and then they were like, oh yeah, but these are not brothers and sisters. So yeah, we need to contextualize and talk about things that interest people in a way that kind of makes sense to them. And yeah, I've been also doing some workshops or seminars at these events, especially over in Europe. And whether it's inner healing, healing, de-stressing, all those things. You can talk about them in a way that will kind of whet their appetite. And my experience has been that when I began to mention Jesus in my presentation, usually very few people leave. They want to hear the message.
Mm.
And actually, the first time that happened, I was in Cyprus. We began to go back to the very same Mind, Body, Spirit Expo that we went to pray first. Then from Canada, we've been going back there. And the first
Yeah.
time they said, since you're like an international person or guest coming all the way from Canada, could you please do a seminar? So I was kind of, that came out of the blue. I was kind of surprised the first time. So I said, sure. They're like, what's your topic? I said, I'll send you my bio and picture and the topic by email because I had to think about it. But it became almost like a Christian revival meeting. In the seminar, there was, I don't know, a few dozen people, and 20 people wanted to come to Jesus. And I lined them up against the wall because I didn't have a ministry team, kind of like, catchers behind them. I thought if they fall over, I don't want to be accused of anything. So I said, now, please, only those who dedicated their lives to Jesus, come quickly and stand by the wall here, and I'll pray for you.
Mm.
And so 20 people came, and yeah, some of them were manifesting the presence of the Holy Spirit, and some people were kind of wobbly. And one guy said, "I'm awfully sorry. I'm really sorry. This never happens to me usually." So we'll be having a lot of fun. Also,
That's
among Muslims, like North Cyprus is a Muslim land, and so we've been going there as well. They have this Heart and Soul Expo there, which is a New Age expo, because they don't consider New Age as religious. So they welcome, Muslims can be New Agers and holistic wellness people.
yeah.
So we befriended, this guy who is like the organizer. He has a New Age TV program among the Turkish people, this guy Hassan. So he
Yeah.
asked us to come to his thing, and we went there, and I began to do seminars there too. It was almost only Muslim men who came to my seminar. But anyway, very interesting moments.
That's fantastic.
And Muslims, they do see dreams. Then they came to our booth, the Open Sky Cafe, which is the name of our booth. They came and they're like, I have this dream, and could you help me to understand? And it was, Isa, it was Musa, Joseph, Jesus. They had seen Moses. So anyway, interesting stuff.
Great. If you guys have questions that are on the call, put them in the chat, write them out. There's a great question from Tim and Corinne, and we'll get to that. But I think you're starting to talk about that. They're asking about the name YWAM Alternatives. Did you meet any resistance with that name? You can think about that. And how did you overcome that? How did you overcome those challenges? Even on when we were advertising this, I took a couple sentences from your website that says new spiritual movements are spreading and they offer healing and wellness as well as esoteric experiences. And somebody wrote on the Facebook page and said, "Oh, this sounds really weird." And
Yeah,
so, you know, um, you can
I
answer
know.
that.
I know. There's this YWAMers community, this Facebook group, and I'm there too. There are many like YWAM grads and so forth. I think a few thousand. And somebody posted there a couple of years ago that there's this YWAM Alternatives Network Ministry. It looks really weird and new agey. They're doing some really dark stuff. They're really, really, they've gone off the rails and stuff. And so anyway, I know we've been attacked mostly by Christians. We don't get any attacks from like non-Christians and New Age people. Of course, they embrace everybody anyway, except preaching legalistic, judgmental Christians. So anyway, yeah, I don't know what the question is about, like YWAM Alternatives Network. We don't really get a lot of criticism among Christians because of that name. And to the expos and festivals, we go under the name of Open Sky Cafe.
Mhm.
So usually
Great.
people don't know initially that we're even Christians, because we don't have like big crosses and black Bibles on the table there or anything like that. Our banners look different, and there's a menu, a banner that mentions we offer spiritual readings and healing touch and dream interpretation. We also offer spiritual house cleansing visits after the expos. One New Age lady came by our booth once and said that, oh, you do spiritual house cleansing. Is that like ghost busting? I said, that's exactly what it is. She's like, that is very interesting because I also offer ghost busting. Oftentimes they call it space clearing also. And we have had people referred to us by psychics because they couldn't help some people. So they thought that maybe Christians could help you. So we've gone to all kinds of places, especially here in Toronto and Ontario, sometimes big mansions. Even one place had like a mosaic pentagram, like you come into the lobby of this mansion, and on the floor, the first thing that greets you is like this huge pentagram.
Oh,
And it's fun. It's kind of like Hollywood horror movies. Sometimes these places where we go to, they say there's like all windows and doors closed, and there's this wind blowing, and every morning they wake up and the house smells like sulfur, and we're like, I wonder what that is. So anyway, a lot of good conversation starters with people.
yeah. Can you share with us a story of a healing or a transformation that really gives the heart of YWAM Alternatives?
Yeah, well, a few years ago, we were at the big convention center downtown Toronto at this New Age Expo that they've usually had like 20,000 people coming. And there was a New Age guy, making like a documentary film. So he was going to different exhibitors, different booths. He came to our booth as well, and he had a cameraman with him, and he explained he's doing this documentary. And I said, as you see, we're very busy. We had a lineup, and we usually have 3 teams of our people ministering at the same time inside the booth, but we still have a lineup, usually like up to 1 hour lineup. And I said, we're really busy here, but I could personally take you. I'll grab another team member, and I could help you, serve you, just you, minus the cameraman. And if you want to try what we offer, you can come in. So he came in, and he had some questions to Jesus. First, he actually asked, he said, so you guys are like Jesus followers, so you talk to Jesus? Can you ask Jesus questions? So he had some questions he wanted us to ask Jesus. And but then eventually, quite quickly, actually, I explained that he can talk to Jesus, and it's very simple for him to get that connection. So he gave his life to Jesus, and he began to attend our little meetings. We had created by that time this community in Toronto called Mystical School of Christ. I know I may get some slack for that too, but so anyway, he was coming to our meetings, and then eventually he asked to be baptized. I was
Mm,
like, oh, that's a good idea. So I asked anybody else who wants to be baptized, within the next couple of weeks. So there was a whole bunch of ex-New Agers.
wow.
So I baptized this guy, Rob, and then he sends me an email. He says, Yari, do you know a good place in Toronto to burn stuff? I'm like, well, they do have those fire pits by the lake. But he said, no, the police might come there. That's almost downtown, and they might know me. I'm like, oh, why would the police know you? he said, well, I was under house arrest earlier because I threatened to kill the mayor. I'm like, oh, that makes sense. So anyway, we found a place outside of Toronto to burn his satanic Bible and all of his porn stuff and all that. So anyway, yeah, that was interesting. So he began to come to all of our meetings and home groups and stuff. Concerning a healing, there is a cool story. A lady called Shirley Ann. She came to us in a wheelchair and at the expo, and some people gathered to watch, like from outside the booth. And she said that she had had a car accident 7 years earlier and hadn't been able to walk for 7 years. So
Mhm.
anyway, we prayed, and I just felt that we need to go on praying. Like usually we give people like, I don't know, 15, 20, 25 minutes. Oftentimes it goes for half an hour. But we were going over half an hour, but I just felt that Jesus is there with us.
Mhm.
Pretty soon the lady began to say that, uh, get all these bandages off of my legs. Like she
Mhm.
had all these bandages there, they were swollen. And so we filled this whole basket with those bandages. And then she's like, I think I might be able to walk. Well, we tried, but she was too weak. And we prayed more, maybe a couple of minutes longer. And then she's like, I think I can walk. So we supported her. She stood up and she was able to walk in the aisle outside the booth. So we were filming that and people were gathering. And anyway, then eventually we took other people in, and there were some New Agers standing by. They're like, I'm next.
Mhm.
And so that's very good for advertising right there.
It's great. That's great. We're going to get to, there's a great question that's, or a comment that can be turned into a question that's there in the chat. We'll get to that in just a little bit. But Jari, this is so rich and so good um, as you're reaching out to a whole group of people. And this is really, I mean, we're living in a age where the church is really declining, and yet spirituality is not declining. People are looking for outside the four walls of the church, and this is where we need to go. What lessons, what advice would you give to us that you've learned through lessons in this ministry um,
Okay.
to help people engage with spiritual seekers?
Well, one thing I've been learning the last year and a half in Finland, where I come from, there's a revival among spiritual seekers, an actual revival. I know that oftentimes we throw around that word, it may mean all kinds of different things, just a good church meeting or something. It's a revival. But in Finland, something began to happen about 3 years ago. Uh, Lots of New Age people, they're coming to Jesus just like I say now, they are led to Jesus by Jesus, even not by us or some church or other ministry. I guess we've been kind of sowing into the atmosphere. We've been going to Finland also to these expos for many, many years. And we have trained, I think, hundreds of Christians in Finland to do this kind of ministry and be, prophetic and do this kind of evangelism among even like their co-workers and co-students, not just at expos, but we really try to teach lifestyle evangelism using the gifts of the Holy Spirit. So this thing is happening, and we need to just pray. Some of these New Agers began to just come at home or whatever place outside of any expo or festival. They just began to have dreams and experiences. And some of them, they came to Jesus on their own. Then they started, there's a couple of YouTube channels. They started podcasts and YouTube channels where they interview other ex-New Agers. And then more New Agers come to Jesus. They watch these programs. So we just need to really sow the seed and not be disappointed if people don't come to Jesus right away. Or even if they come to Jesus, like we have led hundreds of people to Jesus
Mm.
through the expos, but I don't think we're very naive. Like, we know that it's kind of almost like pre-evangelism and pre-discipleship. It's a long journey for many of them. And in Finland, we run every 6 months, we run a conference called Age of Spirituality Conference for Christians. And we have a whole bunch of ex-New Agers testifying there every time. And we talk about how we have been doing things. And the ex-New Agers, they tell how they came to Jesus. And somebody said that, yeah, remember, I went to this one big expo in Helsinki, and I even visited the Open Sky Cafe there and had an interesting experience, but it didn't bring me to Jesus at that point. But then a few years later, she came to Jesus. I just want to tell the story of my friend in Finland who used to have like a hypnotism program on secular TV in Finland. He was a hypnotist and an energy healer. He was hypnotizing people live on TV, getting them to do funny things and all that. Had a big New Age business, and but he began to think about Jesus. People had been praying for him. Some people I know, some our friends, new friends, ex-New Agers, some of them said that, yeah, we had been praying in our prayer group on Telegram for this couple, this guy and his wife, and bam, now they came to Jesus. So I'm friends with this guy. We keep in touch. We have calls and do Zoom calls and whatnot, and I'm trying to help him. So he shared they were going in the summer of 2003. They were going to their summer cottage, he and his wife, and she had prayed that God would give some kind of a sign if he exists through rain, like some kind of a miraculous rain sign.
Mm-hmm.
Well, she went to the lake by their cottage to swim, and she said that it began to rain, but it was raining only on her. There was no rain otherwise. The water was coming down just on her. And then the husband went to sauna. In Finland, we have these saunas. It's not a sauna, it's sauna. So he was sitting in his hot sauna, and he said, I decided to ask Jesus. He said, I told Jesus, you're God, you know everything, right? So tell me who I am and what you think about me. So he says, Jesus had shown him how he had been serving darkness and leading a lot of other people into darkness. So he came out of the sauna shaking in his non-existing boots and told his wife that we need to stop everything. He stopped everything. He lost his income. So he's been living by faith, like a YWAMer, the last like over a year now. But he's also initially he was trained in IT. So he prayed and God gave him this amazing idea for this one software company. And they bought the idea from him, his program. And he's set for 5 years now, he said. So anyway, God's helping him. But he's
Yes.
a cool guy with his wife. Now they do these YouTube programs. He's interviewing all his former Satanists, even some guy from South Africa who was like the main Satanist there. And these people are coming to Jesus and interviewing other Finnish ex-New Agers and just teaching the Bible. God is
Yeah.
teaching him a lot.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that, Jesus freaks in the 60s and 70s. They're
Yeah.
getting these downloads and just being radical. So pray. That's my advice. Pray, pray, pray. Even if you don't see a lot of immediate results, we're always looking for results in our evangelism. But this is really about friendship and, like we call it, process evangelism.
I like that. I like that. I like that. That's sometimes we're chasing people to believe rather than belong, and sometimes they have to belong and then they start believing.
Yeah.
And
Then
it's
they start behaving. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's a journey, and it's not always a quick thing. So I just want to open up for questions. You can see I put Yar, I hope it was okay, Yari. I think we talked about this before. I put your email in the chat channel there.
Okay.
So if people want to get a hold of you, you offer training programs, I believe, and
Yeah.
are able to teach in some of our DTSs or our other courses to help people get trained in reaching spiritual seekers. If you don't, if you can't write your question out in the chat, just unmute yourself now and ask. Love to hear from different ones, any questions that you have in the remaining minutes that we have. And one, I think you did talk about this. One of the things that was put in the chat there was about how Hindus profess to receive Jesus as their Lord, but they go on believing in so many other gods. And contextualization is one thing, but believing in Jesus as the only way is another thing. And it was just a comment I think that was being made. I'm not sure there's a question there or is there.
Well, concerning
Oh,
that, I'd
yeah,
like to say something. We get these questions like, do they really come to Jesus and all that? Sometimes I've used this when New Agers, they're ready to pray and come to Jesus. I explain that it's kind of like getting married to one. It's not a harem, because they like to include things, maybe even Jesus, they'd like to include Master Jesus among all the other ascended masters. But I
right,
tried to explain that this is kind of like, in our society still, you can usually be married to officially just to one. So you need to, forsake all the other stuff to really have that working
right.
relationship with Jesus.
Yeah, the question was there. So how do you have them fouled up once they give their heart to the Lord?
Yeah, well, we offer discipleship. Of course, we invite people to come to church if they're ready for that. Many are not ready, like the following Sunday, to come to church. That's why we started our own program for follow-up. And we have been also offering inner healing and deliverance. So, but it's all like we do that in our own home.
Right,
We've had all kinds of people come to our home for like inner healing, follow-up, deliverance, but also people even before they come to Jesus. We've had Christmas parties, barbecues in the summer for New Agers and psychics and all that. All those people that when I used to teach on spiritual warfare in YWAM DTSs, I was warning not to do this. But now we're doing it.
yeah. Are there questions from any of you that are on the call that you want to raise? Just unmute yourself and fire away.
Do you have a problem with, or if people consider you a New Age Christian or mystic Christian, do you have a problem if people consider me a New Age Christian? Is that the question? Yeah, I don't know what that means, really, New Age Christian. You mean somebody who has left Christianity and joined New Age? We haven't done that. We contextualize in terms of the language we use. I have no problem talking about energy, for instance, because energy is something that our God has created. Like physicists say, everything is energy. And I believe that when power went out from Jesus and that lady was healed, you could say that energy went out of Jesus. Of course, we're careful. I'm not trying to tell people that the power of the Holy Spirit is just some kind of impersonal energy, because the Holy Spirit is a person. But I believe that some of the things that Jesus was doing in the New Testament, there was some energy, power, energy involved. In the New Testament Greek, there are many words in Greek for power. Dunamis is just one of them. Another one is energy.
I'm just putting the questions that you did answer in the chat. I'm sorry they were directed directly to me, and I didn't realize they were just directed directly to me. So you guys didn't see those questions. You already answered them, though, so don't worry about trying to answer them
Okay.
again. But I'm just putting them in there for the history of the call so that you can see that those were questions that people on the call here were asking as you were
Yeah.
talking. Anybody else have a verbal question? You want to mute yourself, or a comment you want to make, or an endorsement you want to give to Jari, or anything? That's fine. We have
Yeah.
a few minutes left here before we sign off.
Please, I want to hear your voice.
Okay, I have a thought. I don't know if you know who David Garrison is. David has written a book called A Wind in the House of Islam. He's been in and out of the Muslim world, interviewing Muslims for years now. And this book documented a massive conversion within the Muslim community that is happening today and has been happening for the last 30 years. David is a friend of mine. I asked him the question you were just asked about Hindus, because it's been said that Hinduism is not simply a religion, it's also a culture. And so asking a Hindu to give up Hinduism is like asking a Christian in the United States to give up being an American, which these days might not be a bad idea. But his response was that Hindus, generally speaking, they don't worship all 300 million of those gods. They tend to focus on one or two gods who then become their guru. And if we can introduce them to the guru Jesus, it doesn't really matter, at least not initially, that they forsake all other gods. But as they continue to follow Jesus, they very much on their own, very often over the course of time, begin to just start forgetting about those other gods.
Mm.
I'm wondering, I guess, how you approach, because I'm involved in a discussion group every Sunday morning in a coffee shop. I don't go to the local church anymore. I go to a local coffee shop, and it's filled with people who, some are Christians, some are, quote, New Agers, some are atheists, some are agnostics. And we get into conversations like this all the time. And I find it really, really easy to talk about Jesus. And they know that I'm a passionate follower of Christ. But I have no intention of, at the end of the day or at the end of the week or month, I have no intention of leading anybody to Jesus or getting them to a certain place. And I don't have a problem with that, but I know there are those who do. They think that I have to have some sort of hidden agenda that by 6 months or a year, I've prayed for this many people and this many people have been baptized. How do you get beyond that? Or do you get beyond that? Do you have an agenda to move them to a particular place at a particular time, or not? I struggle with this a little bit. I'm trying to decide if I'm not doing enough.
Good question, John. Good
Yeah.
question.
Well, like I said, we believe in process, evangelism, or whatever you want to call it. Evangelism, I know that now in this, I don't know, postmodern environment or climate, many people, they are allergic to evangelism or forcing anything or manipulating. So that's one thing when we train our future team members also from churches. We try to explain that, we just need to love people or love on people, like they say nowadays. And if people want to get to know this Jesus that we follow, then we'll help them. And if we sense, this is also part of being prophetic as Christians, if we sense that the person is hungry or open, or they just don't know how to ask, or they're afraid to ask, we try to help them. But yeah, we want to also help people to actually get in touch with Jesus, find Jesus, believe in Jesus. So I believe that's still what Jesus wants us to do, to go and tell people about him and how to get to heaven in eternity. So I think it is a serious matter. And in the past, since it is a serious matter, Christians have been usually quite pushy and aggressive in their evangelism. I know there's in YWAM too. I think there's been, especially I guess in the 80s, there was this mercy ministry revival, and a lot of people were saying that, you know, just doing mercy ministry, no strings attached, that is enough. That is kingdom ministry. So some Christians may get upset when we say that God heals sick New Agers and pagans, and they still don't come to Jesus, you know, and become Christians, although they got healed. Or even worse, we do emotional therapy among New Agers. So some Christians are like, well, how can God inner heal anybody if they're not born again? So my question is like, well, do these people still have a soul, psyche, that may need some help, emotional therapy and healing in that way? So yeah, we get into all these situations with Christians, like, you know, non-Christians, people in the world or in the New Age, they are open to all this stuff. Somebody please help me, bless me, heal me. But Christians like, okay, does this actually even belong to non-Christians, you know, or should we bless them? Maybe we're blessing them too much. So, and then, you know, the question comes like, are you now in the New Age yourself? Because you're so loving these people and helping them and so forth. So there's a bit of a culture war happening here among Christians concerning how to reach all these people around us, which is like in Finland too, they confirmed, you know, according to some studies, about 20% of the population, I guess adults, I don't know, are into New Age and New Spirituality. But by and large, Christians aren't really doing much anything about that.
All right, I'm going to pause the recording here in just a little bit. We are coming to the end of we've already gone over my 45-minute limit. You can stay on though. This is a great question and bringing out some really good stuff. So thank you for attending our spotlight on YWAM Alternatives. And I'll be coming out with another one very shortly. But this concludes our time. If you want to stay on, we'll keep on talking about this. I see a suggestion in the chat there. So I'd like to have Mihail just talk about what he put in there maybe a little bit. But thanks for being on the call with us today on Spotlight with YWAM Alternatives.